I was born on the 1st of October 1923, and apparently when I came home to the house and my mother said she was going to call me Muriel, my surname being Owen, that went ahead and I was christened Muriel. But immediately my grandparents, I only had grandpas, not grandmothers at that time, never called me Muriel, I always got Mollie. So Mollie, it stuck. So really and truly, on any sort of document of importance, I still sign Muriel because it's on my birth certificate, my passport. But really, I've been called Mollie all my life. So, coming to the childhood, well, everybody after the First World War was poor. My father had worked for a German warehouse before the war. He came home to no job. But he did manage to get a small house next door to my grandfather. That was my paternal grandfather. And we lived in this quite small house. But the one thing, as I look back, which I'm very grateful for, that I had a very, very happy but poor childhood. I can remember going off to the library as a little tiny girl with Dad, and the librarian had these glasses on the end of her nose and she looked over a big counter and I seemed to be so small, and she said, right, show them, and you had to put your hands up, show the hands are clean before you could have a book, and then you had to go round the back and you had to demonstrate with a children's book that you could read. If you couldn't, she wasn't lending you a book. You know, that was how it went those days. And so many happy things. I mean, none of the things that children have now. We had gas lighting, we had coal fires, the coalman called once a week. If for any reason we got a bad cold and we did have to have a little time in bed, Dad used to just shovel some of the coal and everybody had to move out of the way. Then he chased up the stairs and put it in the grate upstairs. So it was going for when us children went to bed and the room would be warm, you see. I just got one brother and there was just the two of us. Very happy childhood. And I can remember the different seasons. We had a season for everything. A season for hopping, hopscotch, jumping, bobber and kibs, playing tea shops, going out and going to the local greengrocers and getting ropes what tied the orange boxes up and swinging them on lampposts, and you were able to swing round, not doing anybody any harm at all, but that's the way we lived those days. When we were a little bit older and Dad had found a job, because Mum always was involved in some sort of work of some description, but never leaving Bill and I. You know, she was always had little jobs, but she always was there when we came home from school. And of course, like, I was spoilt because we went to the school at the end of the road. Both house and school now has been demolished. And at lunch break in the morning, when we went out in the schoolyard to play, there would be Mum with a big jug of hot cocoa, and she'd pass it through the railings. But not to me alone, to all the other little ones. And I'm sure some of them hadn't had any breakfast, so, you know, it was very welcome. It's a different life altogether than what we live now. However, Dad was in work and we managed to move. I didn't know my maternal grandma. She had died while my father was in the trenches. So he didn't know his mother had died. She just died and messages didn't get through, so he'd no idea. But my paternal grandfather lived next door, and he was a rather strict old man, but very nice. And when my cousins came down, we all met up on Christmas Eve. It was very nice and then very exciting for us to walk home, because it was late at night and there was no transport, so we had to walk home on Christmas Eve. So by then we'd settled in the new house, new school, loved it, Never found school a problem. I don't know that I learnt very much when I was there, but still it was a happy time. And Bill seemed very happy too. He'd passed his 11 plus by then, and had gone to quite a good school in the centre of Manchester, which had quite a good reputation. Then, of course, we came up to whether I should stay on at school. But I felt, again, money was always tight, that I should leave and get a job, you see. And people didn't stay on at school those days, they just got work. And my cousin said there was a vacancy going in the firm where she worked. So I said, right, well, can I leave? Yes, I could. So I finished school one Friday and I was working the following Monday. And from then on, I worked quite a while at this one firm, and it was father and son, and they were in the baby linen business. And he said, if you stay long enough, you'll learn the whole trade right the way through. Cutting, designing, the lot, you know. And I liked it, but I felt that I didn't want to do that for the rest of my life. So I wanted to do something else. So I decided to apply to the Calico Printers Association. And I rather fancied myself doing designing. Well, I started to work there, but they'd given me assurance at Thomas Lee before I left that if I didn't like it, I could go back. Which I thought was very sweet of them. But they were quite happy. They didn't have everybody back, but they said I could go back. So I started work at the Calico Printers Association, and I don't know quite what I expected, but the smell of these different paints and chemicals as they were making, it was a big firm, and they made patterns of all sorts of things, fabrics, but I just did not like it, it wasn't me. So at first, rather shamefacedly, I didn't want to admit that I would go back to Tommy Lee's and work. So I got a job in an office then, in a dispatch office at Ferguson and Palin, which was a big engineering works. But I was like the little office girl there, again filing and doing various things. And really it wasn't stretching me enough. Meantime, in the evening, most people went and did classes. Further education was the thing then. You know, you could just apply and go to classes quite cheaply, which I'd been doing. And then I went back to Tommy Lee's. I admitted it and went back, and just took back, started to work, and it was as if I'd never been away. But I knew it really wasn't for me. I knew that. So after a lot of consideration, because I was getting a bit older then.
How old would you have been at that point?
Pardon?
How old would you have been at that point?
17, 18, nearly coming up 17, coming up to 18, 17 and a half. After thinking about it, I thought I'd like to try for nursing. But of course it was the entrance examination, and I must confess that some of the girls who were sitting it with me, they'd been in education a lot longer than what I had, and I wondered how, you know, I'd fare. However, take your chance. I went, sat the examination, passed, and then was accepted for nursing. So then I started my training. That would be the end of 1942. And I began the actual training in January 43, 44, 46, that's right, 3-year training.
And where was that at?
That was at Stepping Hill, Stockport. So I did my training there, and then I stayed on, finished my SRN, became a state registered nurse in 46, stayed on to do my first part midwifery, which was hospital based. Had a lot of experience there, loved it. And then there were 6 of us decided that we didn't want to stay in the north to do our second part, district midwifery. We wanted to go to the big city, London. So the 6 of us applied to the South London Hospital, Clapham, and we were accepted there. We went down to Clapham and we did our second part midder. Eventually coming back after we'd finished to Manchester, and right away, not being out of work, finding a temporary job. So I worked for a little while for Christie's, the cancer hospital in Manchester, but I was based at Bagley in Wythenshawe just for 6 months. Marjorie, my friend, we decided this together, she did school nursing for 6 months. But thinking about it, we decided we liked midwifery best of all. So the pair of us applied to Crumsell Hospital in Manchester, one of the large hospitals in North Manchester, was accepted as staff nurses because we were qualified midwives, and we had very happy years there. We stayed on and was eventually midwifery sister there. Well, life goes on, and of course people leave. Eventually Marjorie left, got married to one of the doctors there. A couple of my other friends had gone in the army. They got a commission, they'd got left and gone into the army. So I decided to have a break, and I went down to Bristol and did my Queen's district nurse in Bristol.
What year would this have been?
I can't really remember properly, Lucy. No, I've got it down, all this down. Can't remember. And it was handy going there because having done my midwifery, there was an SOS came into Bristol. Could I go out to Frome in Somerset? Because the district nurse there, who was also a midwife, had broken her arm, and not everybody was qualified midwives, you see, some were just nurses. So I went out to Frome in Somerset, and it was rather a nice little break. However, I sat the certificate, which was very easy. So I became then a Queen's district nurse and did district nursing for a time. So a year and a half went by, and I felt then that I probably wanted to do something else. So I applied to Cheshire County to see if they'd sponsor me to do the health visitors in Manchester, and they said they would. So I came up north again and started at the university to do the health visitors course, which was like a university year. And I started there and I did my health visitors, and because they sponsored me, I had to go to 2 areas that they sent me for the first 2 years. Well, one of them was Northwich, and then eventually I asked for a transfer to Timperley. So I worked in Timperley for some of the time. Meantime, you want to know how I met Granddad? Because at long last I wasn't tied to hospital, I could have a little bit of outside life, so I joined the Rambling Club from the College of Adult Education. Still doing classes, but they ran a Rambling Club, you know, from the college.
Which college was that?
In Manchester. Gone now, not there, you know. It's where the Bridgewater Hall is in Manchester now. It was on that site actually. It's gone, pulled it down. It was opposite the GMX, what used to be the old Central Station. That's gone now. But in its place is an exhibition hall. So the first time I remember your granddad making an impression on me, it wasn't a good one at all. Not a good one at all. Because we were to meet on the forecourt of Central Station. It was still a station then. And we were going out into Derbyshire, walking, you see. And this man came along and we were humming and ahhing who should go in whose car and whether they lived near you to drop them off at the end of the walk. And this man came along and said, "Where do you live? You get in that car, you get in that car." So eventually one of my friends came in my car. I said, "Who's that bossy man there?" I said, "Bossy fussing everybody about organising people. So she said, I don't know who he is. He's somebody, I think, that's just come out with the club. So a few times I weighed up this man and I thought, well, really and truly, he's a bossy biter. Quiet, but bossy. So I didn't really go too close to Grandad at first.
So when did you get married?
Pardon?
When did you get married?
63.
And where?
Where? Well, it was very odd because I thought when people were getting older, people have to do it right. And my idea of right, and your granddad's idea of right, was to keep everything very quiet. So we were married by special licence at All Saints Register Office. And the morning we got married, it was so foggy you couldn't see a finger before you. And I went down to All Saints with my brother, and Howard came with your dad. Only the four of us there. But we had arranged a little lunch at Stanleyland's Hotel. But I said to David, there's got to be no cake. I'm dressing in ordinary clothes, and everybody must feel comfortable at this little luncheon. And I will sit at the head of the table there, and you must sit at the head there. So you don't often see a wedding where the bride and bridegroom don't sit next to one another, but ours was just like that, and you can ask your dad and Uncle Malcolm, but that's true. So I said, now you sit there and have your two boys next to you, and the two wives next to them, and I will sit at the head of the table, and I'll have my mum on one side, because my mother was living then, and Bill on the other side, and Mary, you see. I only invited two of my friends, you know, because the other people, it would be too far. So it's just a small luncheon party. So we left Stanleylands, David and I, to go on our holiday. I didn't want to call it honeymoon or anything like that. Holiday it was. And the day after we got to the Brecon Beacons, your granddad said, well, we'll do a good walk today. And we went out, we got absolutely soaked to the skin. Rain dripping down here. I said, well, this is a fine sort of honeymoon. He just laughed. You know your granddad. Anyway, it was very nice. We had a nice time. We spent half a week walking in the Brecon Beacons, and the other half of the week we walked some of the Welsh coastal path. We came back to live in Avondale Lodge on Whitehall Road, next door to, you know, the last place where we lived. And we lived there for 2 years. And one night I came in from work and said to David, they're dropping the house next door. They're demolishing it. I don't think he knew. He hadn't sort of noticed. So eventually some flats were built there, and we decided that we would take one. But it wasn't easy the first few years of our marriage, because my mother started with Alzheimer's disease, and really trying to run a job and cope with her and please everybody, it wasn't easy. However, we managed somehow, and very happy marriage. Very happy marriage. In between that, of course, after we married, Bill got viral encephalitis and became handicapped, and my mother got Alzheimer's. So it was really quite stressful some of the time. But you see, other things compensated, because eventually Sharon was born, and then Lucy was born. These two little girls used to come over, and we'd have great fun going to the park, and often we'd be delegated to pick you up from horse riding. And I don't know if you remember the big stable that you used to, well, it wasn't
Marbly,
arena
yes.
that used to go around. Grandad hated the stuff that the horses kicked up. And you see, you'd be coming round and you'd say, watch Grandad, watch me. And he'd want to go out to breathe. And he'd say, I'll just go out. No, he won't stay out. You stay here while Lucy comes round and jumps over this fence. Can I go out now? He'd say, no, you must stay, David. She's coming round again. Of course, we'd wait till you come round again. And of course, you come from horse riding here then. Well, not here, you know, the flat. And then we used to have great fun. Well, mostly when these two little girls used to come, we mostly picked them up from horse riding, but not always. Sometimes picked them up from home. And David very much liked them to come here rather than us go and babysit. I don't know why he liked them to come to our place. And we'd sort of have a light lunch, and then we'd spend the time in the afternoon. We used to say to the two girls, now what would you like to do? And you mostly wanted to go over the 60 steps or to the park with the railway. You never seemed to get tired of that. And I mean, odd times we made other suggestions, you know, things to do. But no, we wanted to go to this railway. So we spend the time between Worthington Park and the other sale park where the lion was that used to clamber over. And of course there was swings there as well. So between the two, so there's plenty of running about, plenty of walking. So when we came in, we had our evening meal together. And then we used to go into, I used to put you in the bath together. And of course, one of the delights of your life used to be hearing about a child who I knew as a little one, Sidney Horton. And tell us about Sidney Horton. Well, he was a little monkey and he used to get up to all sorts of tricks. But really, you always wanted to hear about Sidney Horton. And I think probably I embellished it a little bit, but not much, because he was a terror. He was up to all sorts of tricks, and probably because he was naughty, you liked to hear about it. So after the bathing, we'd come into the lounge, and we'd have, sometimes we had games, but usually after the bathing, it was a little quick game of snap, or a read, and then into bed. And you could bet your bottom dollar that Sharon would say she wanted a drink of water, but Lucy always had to have Ribena. And it had to be in that little tiny jar. And I used to be, I think if that Ribena goes all over, it'll stain. And I used to say, be careful, Lucy, I won't spill it, I won't spill it. You never did, you never spilled it, that's quite true. I have to put it there beside your bed.
On a saucer.
On a saucer, yes. Never spilled it. And of course the other delight of your life was you'd come into the bedroom in the morning and then you get in bed and Grandad, before you came in the room, he'd say, take no notice, and perhaps they'll think they're asleep, you see. But you knew they wasn't asleep. You'd come in the bed, and the favourite thing was three in a bed, and one said, roll over, roll over. And Grandad would be trying to get a little nap, but he knew what we were up to. And eventually, of course, you'd get up, and we'd have a leisurely breakfast. Me still telling you not to put as much sugar on your Weetabix. And still putting too much sugar on. Happy days, happy days.
I remember playing I Spy in the bedroom.
Spy, yes, I Spy. And the other thing, you two girls loved playing shop. Make sure one of you would go in a shop when you grew up. The measurements had to be taken with the tape measures, and the money, and see the customer to the door out. Oh yes. And we did bits of sewing, of course. At one time there was a lovely shop in Sale. You don't see shops like this now, but my generation remember them. Worthington's it was called. And as you went in, they had all the wools on one side, all the rolls of material on the other. and then all the pieces of interesting things like pieces of felt to make needle cases or comb cases or little purses. So I used to go in there and I used to buy bits of things, you know, with thick thread that little fingers could, you know, do. And I'd always have something in a drawer ready to bring out. But really you didn't need much entertaining because you were really so happy and good. You know, I hear people say, oh, children, but you really were. I enjoyed it. And I'm sure Grandad did, and I think you did too. Yeah.
Tell me about when we would play traffic lights.
Oh, yes. Well, when we played traffic lights, of course, we pushed the settee in the centre, pushed the two chairs, and Grandad, it was the silliest game. It was a game we made up. I think probably that was the beauty of it. And we'd have to run round the room, and Grandad would say, stop. We'd all have to stop, pull up quick. And then he'd examine the tyres, you know, on your feet, and he'd tell you your tread was going off. And then he'd say, right, on go, you can go now. It's coming to amber. Slow down. Really, I suspect it was done a bit to tire you out. like McAllister going round the floor. But it was a giddy game, but you enjoyed it. Giddy game, but you enjoyed it. And I made up one. You know, we made it up as we went along.
The allotment.
Oh yes, well, part of the time, of course, that we'd go down to the allotment. And of course do you remember the shed on the allotment? The shed on it? I don't know whether you had no garden sheds in the house you were living. You probably didn't. But for some reason you were fascinated by that garden shed. And of course Grandad would take you down the side and he'd show you the raspberries, the rows of raspberries, usually the first, and then there was the blackcurrant bushes, and then there was the gooseberry bushes after that, and the lettuce and the little frame at the end with the tomatoes in. And used to quite enjoy it and loved it if we brought a bit of the fruit back with us, because there was a lot of fruit on there, more than I could cope with.
Jam making.
Oh yeah, jam making. I don't know whether you ever made jam with me. Did you? Yeah. Yes, well, when we brought it back, you see, we bought a pound of fruit back, you had some sugar in. Oh yes, we did, because if you do raspberry jam, raspberries are a dream to make. If you can take them off the stalks fresh, the pectin is so high in it, really, you've only got to cook it for about 5 minutes and it'll set after that. And what you liked, of course, was having that saucer and plonking it on the saucer and tipping the saucer up. You see, I say now, is it wrinkling? You know. Yes, I can remember that now. You've reminded me of that. I'd forgotten. Yeah. I made a lot of jams at one time. Now you don't want any more, Lucy.
We're missing where you grew up. You went through growing up, but I don't know what area you grew up in.
From the beginning, you mean? Well, it was the street where I was born was Dewsnut Street, Ardwick, Manchester. Now that's all gone now. So you can't ever, you know, say, oh, well, where Mollie, that's all gone now. And the school where I went to as a little tiny girl was Bank Meadow. That's all gone.
Was it like a one-room schoolhouse, or was it?
No, it was a proper school, very much like the old Victorian schools that you see, but it's all old, of course, very old. I mean, we went in and we had coal fires. A little old man used to come in halfway through the lessons and put more coal on the fire. And I can remember the headmistress, Miss Bancroft, a lovely lady. A lot of the little ones there, though, I think they'd come from poor homes. Poor homes, yes, yeah. But of course then we moved to Abbey Hay after that, you see. And I lived in Abbey Hay, which is between Openshaw and Fairfield. So some of my formative years was spent there. And at the top of the road at Abbey A, there was sort of fields and a golf links, which was lovely because when you're about 8 or 9 and you want to run about and play, you know, it's lovely to go out of the house and up to the top of the road and onto these fields. And I don't think people worried so much those days that children was going to get into difficulties. Couldn't do it now, of course, but could then.
What activities do you still do?
What?
Activities.
As a child?
No, that you do now.
Do now? Right. If I've got absolutely nothing to do, I might go for a game of badminton on a Monday morning. But if I've been walking on the Sunday, I don't usually go on the Monday. Because I've got boots to clean and if I come in wet and things to put away, so I don't often do that. Tuesday I go to Sale Leisure Centre, and you can go to reduced rate for the sort of over 50s and go in the morning and I have a swim, then I play badminton, then I go down to the little cafeteria and have a toasted tea cake and a mug of tea with the other ladies, and then I go to yoga. So it's a full day on Tuesday. Then on Wednesday I usually do a little walk with the University of the Third Age, which I'm a member of, and then that's on Wednesday. On Thursday morning I go to St Francis's and I do 1 hour movement to music, and it's elderly ladies. They're all very nice, I've known them years. We're all dependent on one another coming, else the class would fold up, you see. I go from St Francis down into Sale and do my shopping, do my weekly shopping. I usually go in the library while I'm down there, and that's on a Thursday. And on a Friday afternoon I go to the meeting at the U3A, that's University of the Third Age. And it's an international thing, that. They've probably got them in Canada, University of the Third Age. I don't know whether you know anything about it. But it means adult learning, but not in the sense that you've got a paid tutor, you've got a coordinator for the class. You depend upon one another. And for 2 years I also went twice a month to the book club. You know, we read a book and then go and discuss it. And the University of the Third Age is a wonderful thing because some go to French, some go to German, some go to arts, some go to drama, some go to history. And there's one person that coordinates the class. And quite a few of the classes are held at Norris Road Community Centre. And if anybody wants a new class, you've just got to mention it. And if they can get 10 people who are interested, they'll sort of make arrangements for it to be held in the community centre. Quite good. You don't want any more, Lucy?
I don't know, have you finished your week off yet?
Where have I got to?
Going to
Friday.
the university?
Friday.
Oh, okay.
Friday, yes. Well, I go there Friday afternoon because it's a lecture, it's talk on Friday afternoon. We pay a small amount, you know, to cover the visiting lecturers' fees, but that's an open afternoon. But quite often we'll get enough input from the floor to fill 1 or 2 Friday afternoons. There's quite a lot of them are school teachers who come, and they can sort of split it into little sections, so they'll present an afternoon, each doing a little bit, you know. Very interesting sometimes, you know, on all sorts of things. And we applied to the National Lottery about 4 years ago, and we were very lucky that we got £25,000 for equipment. So we've got very posh screens. Some of the men can work it. So when it comes up, a lecture, if they want to demonstrate, it's just like being in a cinema or from the National Lottery. But there again, we pay into the lottery, so, you know, it's a national thing. What else? I mean, you could go on forever, Lucy.
I know.
I mean, all the things when I was nursing that we used to, you know, all the years I was stepping ill because the war was on. I mean, you went to Stockport today. In Stockport, there's a lot of deep air raid shelters in the rocks there. They were natural, well, really caves in the rocks, and they made them into air raid shelters in the war. And one of the first things when I started nursing was they took us from Stepping Hill down into Stockport, and we were given certain instructions what we'd have to do in heavy raids, because Stockport Infirmary, which was opposite the town hall, Stockport Infirmary was going to be kept for civilian casualties, and we used to take the military at Stepping Hill. So during the course of my nursing, I nursed a lot of our soldiers and also Germans. We don't know where they'd come from. They used to come in with oilskin bags on with the name and the diagnosis on. They'd already been diagnosed, and we don't know where they were going. But from a good half of my training, I nursed soldiers of one type or another. In between that, very sadly, there was a period when the bus bombs were on London, and they must have brought a lot of elderly people out of the geriatric hospitals in London, and they transferred them to the north of England in converted buses. The bus had converted it. But, you know, it was so sad, really. They should never have been moved because they were too frail and feeble, really, to do that journey. And as we admitted them at Stepping Hill, unfortunately, lots of them didn't live very long after that, very elderly people. It was just one of them sad things about the war. But I suppose they were getting bombed so much down there, and they needed the hospital spaces. They thought if they could get some of the geriatrics out of the hospitals and make a bit of room, it would leave London with a bit more room in the hospitals, you see. And of course we never knew where the Germans were going to, but I did a long night duty on the Germans ward, and a lot of them had very bad accidents, you know, for some reason or other. German Air Force people who'd been shot down, really. Bad legs, you know, that not all of them, some of them were just, something was wrong with them, just prisoners of war. And whether they were sent on to the Isle of Man, we don't know. But our soldiers were in there, and I didn't particularly enjoy nursing our soldiers because some of them was getting better, and they'd go out down the fire escape and go to the local pub if they could. They're supposed to be in by a certain time, and you know, we used to sort of say, if you're not in tomorrow night by the time you're supposed to be in, we'll tell the sergeant of you, because they used to do a round. And had the car for 2 days. It was only a little car, you see. And he came back, and he had one full day then before he went back. And he said to me, do you mind, Mollie, if I go and try and walk Cadair Idris? Malcolm, I said, you're not to go and walk Cadair Idris tomorrow. I said, I've listened to the weather forecast, and I said, the weather forecast is bad. You've not got boots, you've got trainers. He had shoes to go to the funeral, you know, Granddad's funeral. And I said, you've got jeans on that'll hold water. you're not equipped and you mustn't go. Well, he said, well, I said, why don't you just go do a short walk in North Wales and don't go farther? Well, he wanted to go, well, I don't know where he was going to go really eventually. Would I put him some sandwiches up? Yes, I'd put him some sandwiches. So I said, please Malcolm, don't go up Cadidris because you'll get soaking and you'll do this and do that. Anyway, come tea time, and of course he wouldn't be back at tea time, but then it got to be 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock. It was summer, of course, when Grandad died, and eventually came back, and of course he'd been to Cadair Idris, and he attempted to go up Cadair Idris, and all the things I thought would happen to him had happened. He'd got absolutely soaked, and of course he'd had to come home, and he had to drive home in that state. But the thing was, he was going back the following day early. Oh, Malcolm, I said, take your jeans off. So I had the washing machine then, so I put all his washing in the washer. And I thought, I've got to get these dry before tomorrow, because I think he only had one other pair of trousers. And he said, oh, don't worry, Mollie. He said, I'll take them through the airport in a red plastic bag. Oh, no, I said, you will not. I said, and throw those jeans, those trainers away. I said, I'll send you a pair of trainers as a present. I think he did, I can't remember now, but I think he did have to throw the trainers away. However, he was absolutely, he had something to eat first of all. I got him something to eat. Then he went off to bed because he was absolutely tired out. So I was stayed up half the night with the washing machine going and the dryer getting these jeans dry between trying to iron them to try and wash them. Anyway, I got them dry and he put them on, and I went with him to the airport in this car, and then he had to put the key in a box somewhere and leave the car, and then I waved him off, and then I came home. All the things I said would happen to him happened. Yeah. Now, what else do you want to know, love?
Just a little, one of your favourite stories about Grandad.
Well, there was one time I laughed. We were walking up the canal in Derbyshire. Well, it wasn't quite, it was really, no, it's Cheshire there, Cheshire. And I don't know how it had happened, but a donkey got on the canal bank. And the donkey must have smelt the food or something in his rucksack. And I was way behind, and I could see this donkey had come out and gone on the bank. And I heard your father say to the donkey, Grandad say to the donkey, don't walk so close behind me. And when he turned round, it was the flipping donkey. And I stood and I laughed. I really laughed about it. I mean, you got to see it, really. I mean, you don't often see a donkey on a canal. And of course I said, well, what should we do with the donkey? Anyway, he said, where did it come on? Well, I'd seen where it came on, but trying to entice that donkey off the canal back into the field. I said, well, take some of that, bit of that food out of your bag, and we'll tempt it back again with a bit of food. Anyway, we did get it back onto this field. But I've often thought about that and laughed about your Grandad thinking it was me pushing him, it was the donkey nuzzling at the back of him. What else now? I mean, I don't know, and I suppose you look at somebody sometimes, and I used to look at him on the allotment and I used to think, Well, he's as happy as a sandboy there, you know. And of course, he'd retired when I was still working. And he used to love it if I made a fruit cake. I did lots of baking in the past. He used to love it if I made a fruit cake. And I'd put him up. I used to call it his little nose bag. Like a little, you know. I said, here's your nose bag now. And I'd put it up and he'd have a little sandwich and a piece of cake and a flask. And sometimes when I was going back to work, I'd drop him off at the allotment. It took me out of my way a little bit, but it pleased him. So I'd drop him off at the allotment. And of course, I'd look back and he'd already got his sleeves rolled up, looking back now, ready to do the allotment. And he loved that old allotment, he really did. I don't know there's anything that really stands out, Lucy, because there's so many things that you think about. I don't know if I said to you, what do you remember about Alan? You may have something, I don't know, but there's so many things, isn't there?
How he can always make me smile no matter what mood I'm in.
Pardon?
How he can always make me smile no matter what mood I'm in.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
I think one of the great things about Grandad was, if you were really in a corner, or you were really et up tight, he could always smooth it over somehow. You know, I mean, it's difficult to explain really, but, you know, he was a rock of strength regarding my mother, because it's terribly difficult dealing with an Alzheimer's patient, one of your mother too. You know, the decisions are terrible, and yet he could come out, I suppose, standing back from the situation. He could give me a very balanced view on what was happening, and I hadn't got a balanced view. I just knew I didn't know what to do really in this situation. So that was one of the marvellous things about Grandad. Yes. Fingers in your ears.